In mid-April of 2016, we visited the Netherlands on a Viking river cruise. We timed our trip to coincide with the blooming of the tulips in Holland. Highlights of the trip included a visit to a working tulip farm, a home visit with a young Dutch family, a tour of the iconic Windmills of Kinderjik, and a day at the world-class Keukenhof Gardens. The Netherlands has a lot going on, all packed into an area a little over twice the size of New Jersey. Considering its size, its population of 17 million makes it one of the most densely populated countries in the world. The Netherlands also has one of the world's most modern road and transportation networks. Holland is often thought of as being another name for the Netherlands, and often the name is used just that way. Technically, however, Holland is not a country, but simply the name of a province on the west coast of the country along the North Sea. After the Dutch East India Company was founded in Amsterdam in 1602, the Holland area became the epicenter of trade and commerce for all of Europe. Dutch imperialism extended to the Far East, Indonesia, and the Caribbean Sea. By the end of the 17th century, known as the Dutch Golden Age, the Netherlands was the wealthiest nation in the world. Today, the Netherlands has the 17th largest economy in the world. The country's three largest cities are Amsterdam, the unofficial capital, Rotterdam, Europe's largest port, and The Hague, the official capital and seat of the government. Our trip began in Amsterdam, and the cities we visited there were, of course, Amsterdam to begin with, then Hoorn, Arnhem, the Windmills at Kinderjik, Antwerp, Belgium, Ghent, Belgium, Veer, Delft, and the beautiful Keukenhof Gardens. A Viking River cruise ship was our home for the cruise. Here's a photograph of Amsterdam showing the large metropolitan area with a population of about 2.5 million. Another photo here emphasizes, actually this is a map, showing the extensive canal system which has led to the city sometimes being referred to as the Venice of the North. The morning after our arrival in Amsterdam, we left our ship and boarded a canal tour boat for a scenic and relaxing ride among some of the city's 60 miles of canals. Amsterdam is an old city by our standards, having been established in 1306, but today is a modern city in every way. The elaborate canal system and narrow houses with gabled facades are legacies of the city's 17th century golden age, and give the city its distinctive character. Many of the buildings and houses lining the canals date back to the 1600s. During the Golden Age, buildings were taxed according to their width. It's not clear whether this is still the case, but nevertheless, newer buildings seem to be quite narrow too. An interesting feature of the narrow buildings is that often the stairs are so narrow and steep furnishings could not be moved to the upper floors. To solve that problem, a pulley is rigged from a hook on an arm at the front peak of the building to hoist items up through a large upper window. These arms were visible on many of the buildings we saw as we cruised along the canals. On a brief walking tour of the area, we noticed the busy bicycle traffic. Cycling is said to be part of the city's character. Bike lanes are everywhere, and some have their own traffic signals. In a recent year, over 1 million bikes were registered in Amsterdam, far outnumbering actual city residents. Because of their practicality and convenience, doctors, teachers, workers, and students alike use bicycles every day as their main means of transportation. During our walk, we saw the Anne Frank House, the Rembrandt Museum, visited the Van Gogh Museum, and paid a visit to a diamond polishing factory. Amsterdam is an important center for the diamond industry. This was a lot to pack into a day's touring activity, but the scenes were memorable, and we learned a lot about Amsterdam and the Netherlands. Coming up next is a visit to the city of Delft. Before embarking on our river cruise through the Netherlands, the cruise line arranged for buses for a day trip to the small city of Delft. Delft is a canal-ringed city in the western part of Netherlands dating back to the 11th century and receiving its charter in 1246. And the city is best known for its namesake hand-painted blue and white pottery known as Delftware, Delft Blue, or simply Delft. After a brief walking tour of downtown Delft, we visited a Delftware factory to view the many special displays and have a walk through the factory on a Saturday afternoon. As a direct result of the commercial exploits of the East India Company in the 17th century, imported Chinese porcelain became highly sought after in Europe. Soon, Dutch artisans were copying this art and developed a robust market for this distinctive glazed pottery. Factories around Delft had an early start in developing and capturing the European market, since it was close to the home ports of the Dutch East India Company. While Delft signature pieces are a distinctive blue, many pieces have been produced in other colors. Among the most recognized Delftware designs are reproductions of artist Johannes Vermeer, a native son of Delft born there in 1632. He frequently used Delft street scenes and Dutch windmills and ships as subjects for his paintings. Delftware items range from simple household items, plain white with little or no decoration, to fancy artwork. Pictorial and commemorative plates were made in abundance, illustrated with religious motifs, native Dutch scenes with windmills and fishing boats, hunting scenes, landscapes, and seascapes. Sets of plates were made with the words and music of songs on them, and when dessert was served on them and the plates were cleared, the company started singing. Over the years, Delft potters made many millions of tiles, and they can still be found in many Dutch houses today. Here are pictures showing tiles used in the home of French poet and novelist Victor Hugo, as well as in the toilet of a castle in Germany. The visit to the factory was mildly interesting, but being a Saturday afternoon, there wasn't much going on. Nevertheless, one can get an idea of the size and scope of the operation. Stacks and stacks of molds were everywhere to be seen, and our Delft guide explained a little of the production process. Following a short tour of the factory, our buses returned us to the ship, and the next morning we'd be sailing to the city of Hoorn. Our Viking longship sailed the former Zuider Zee from Amsterdam to the beautiful and very old Dutch city of Hoorn. Founded in the year 716, Hoorn rapidly grew to become a major harbor town and center for Dutch commerce. During Holland's golden age of the 1600s, Hoorn was the home of the Dutch East India Company, often abbreviated VOC, and it was a very prosperous center of trade. The Hoorn fleet plied the seven seas and returned loaded with precious commodities. Exotic spices such as pepper, nutmeg, cloves, and mace were sold at vast profits. With their skill in trade and seafaring, sons of Hoorn established the town's name far and wide. For example, Cape Horn, the southernmost point of the Americas, was named after the town by a Hoorn sea captain who rounded it in 1616. Many of the town's beautiful buildings and architecture can be traced back to the trade groups and guilds of the Golden Age. Hoorn's fortunes declined somewhat in the 18th century. The prosperous trading port became little more than a sleepy fishing village on the Zuider Zee. There was a period during which the town gradually turned its back on the sea as it became the center of the entire coastal region's agricultural businesses. Shopkeepers and traders alike devoted themselves to trading in dairy products, produce, seed production, bulbs, and tulips. Today, Hoorn is closed to the North Sea and not a seaport at all. As part of the Netherlands' flood control efforts, a 20-mile dike separates the sea from what is now called Lake Jesselmeer and brought an end to the body of water known as the Zuider Zee. After the Second World War, growth was again reinvigorated. At the center of a flourishing horticultural region, Hoorn developed an extremely varied economy. During the 1960s, Hoorn was designated an overflow city to relieve pressure on the overcrowded Amsterdam area. Thousands of people swapped their cramped little apartments in Amsterdam for a family house with a garden in one of Hoorn's modern new developments. During our morning walking tour of historic Hoorn, one of the highlights was a visit to the home of a young family who welcomed a small group of us into their home. We were served a dessert and enjoyed a time of casual conversation and learning about their day-to-day activities and the differences we each saw in our respective cultures. Their young daughter basked in the attention from us visitors, and we in turn were captivated by her innocence and her love for the sweets. In the afternoon, buses took us about 15 miles into the countryside for a visit to a working commercial tulip farm. The farmer's wife operates a catering business and hosts tourist visits. She explained tulip farming operations and took us into the fields where we were surrounded by acres and acres of beautiful tulips. We learned about two markets for tulips. One is for tulip bulbs, and the other is for fresh tulip flowers. Each market requires its own method of farming. For example, the fields of tulips that we were in would be farmed for the bulb trade. Therefore, within a few days, all of these tulip flowers were to be topped and the flowers used for compost. Topping the tulips is simply the process of mowing the flower tops off. This encouraged the plant to direct nutrients to the bulb rather than use to further mature the flowers. Here's a short video showing the topping of the tulips. Then in August, when the tulip plant has turned brown and the bulb begins to go dormant, the bulbs are dug by huge machines, taken to the processing barns where they're separated, washed, graded, and readied for market to the bulb trade. This was the future for all the bulbs in the fields surrounding us. Here's another video showing this process. The other type of tulip farming is to grow tulips to the bud stage, then prepare them for the fresh flower market. In this process, the bulbs are considered waste and used for compost or livestock feed. In early April, just before the tulip flowers open, the entire plant is harvested intact and brought into the processing barns. Here, an automated production line cuts the stems to a uniform length, discards the spent bulbs, counts stems into standardized bunches, ties and wraps each bunch where they are crated and ready for shipment to the tulip auction. The tulips are held in enormous warehouses in preparation for shipping worldwide. We learned a lot about tulip farming and were impressed by how mechanized and automated the tulip farm is. All in all, we had a full day and brought home many fine recollections of our time with the family from Hoorn and our new knowledge about farming tulips in the Netherlands. The next stop on our trip was to visit the Dutch windmills of Kinderdijk. After sailing from the city of Arnhem, the city of a fierce World War II battle as depicted in the movie A Bridge Too Far, our ship tied up along the Lek River just a few hundred yards from the iconic and historic windmills. Kinderdijk is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and according to their literature, quote, "The people of the Netherlands have admirably demonstrated their water handling technology by the windmill installations at Kinderdijk. Construction of hydraulic works for the drainage of land for agriculture and settlement began in the Middle Ages and have continued uninterrupted to the present day. The site illustrates all the typical features associated with this technology: dikes, reservoirs, pumping stations, and a series of beautifully preserved windmills." In this setting, the windmills pump water from the low reclaimed areas, or polders, to higher elevations and ultimately out into the river. Beginning in the 1400s, many windmills were used for pumping water from flooded lands. Other windmills were used, of course, to power sawmills, granaries for milling flour, and we even saw one powering laundry paddles for a village laundry. Our local Viking escort explained the workings of the windmill and demonstrated how the bonnet at the top of the windmill can be rotated so the blades, or sails, are turned to face the wind. We were able to enter a typical mill keeper's home inside a working windmill and ascended to the top to see how the wind drives the mechanical parts of the mill. In this picture, you can see how the large wheel driven by the sail has cogs which engage to a right angle caged gear to drive the main vertical shaft. We'll see that a little better in a windmill cutaway view in a moment. The purpose of these windmills, of course, here is to move water. In this layout of Kinderdijk, we can see vast areas of reclaimed land, the polders, and an elaborate series of ditches and small canals. Some of these canals are at different elevations than others, so the idea is to pump water from the lowest areas of the polder to a higher ditch which eventually flows to the river. The whole countryside has dikes which protect the polders from river water, but with seepage and rain, the polders would flood if it weren't for the pumping. Today, the few remaining working windmills are only doing a small part of the pumping. Most of the serious pumping is handled by electric motor-driven pumps. In this cutaway view of a windmill, you can see the sails rotating a heavy horizontal shaft, which in turn causes a vertical shaft to rotate. That shaft extends to the ground level and causes a cylindrical gizmo to rotate, which moves the water uphill as shown in this little video. Except try to picture water moving uphill rather than a bowling ball. This gizmo is called an Archimedes screw, named after the Greek mathematician, and used today all over the Netherlands in these applications. The heavy lifting in this water control scheme is done by electric motor-driven screws, which can move large volumes of water over greater heights compared to what windmills are capable of doing. What we have here at Kinderdijk is the day-to-day management of water in the polders. This is going on all over the country. The other battle the Netherlands faces is to prevent the North Sea from reaching the interior part of the country, much of which is below sea level. To do this, they launched the Delta Works project, which consists of sea dikes, causeways, locks, dams, gates, and other structures to stop sea surges from getting through. Normal tide changes aren't a problem, so all these gates are usually open. But when any surge or high sea condition is detected, these mechanisms act to close off the sea to prevent flooding. The Delta Works project has taken 25 years to complete at a cost of over $8 billion. It's considered one of the 8 modern engineering wonders of the world. For most of us, windmills in Holland have just been a scenic icon. But after this visit to Kinderdijk, we have a better understanding of why windmills were first used and how they operate. Our Netherlands trip culminated in our visit to the Keukenhof Gardens, southeast of Amsterdam. I think for both of us, this would be the most memorable day yet. Keukenhof Gardens is said to be one of the world's premier spring gardens. About 30 minutes from Amsterdam, the tulip fields outside our bus window hinted that we were getting close to our destination. Even the bulb sculpture in the traffic roundabout told us we weren't far from Keukenhof Gardens. As we approached the parking lot, the size of the lot and number of cars and buses put me in mind of an arrival at Disney World. However, the largest crowd we experienced was at the entry gate at opening time. Once we were inside, there was plenty of space for all. Our first thought was, where do we begin? Thankfully, we have a visitor's map of the gardens to serve as our guide. Lying before us and stretching into the distance was lush green grass along winding pathways lined with perfectly designed flower beds. Trees and bushes were showing signs of leafing out, and we could see pavilions to the left and right. And in the distance, a windmill completed the picture. The gardens cover about 80 acres and include 4 pavilions for hosting special flower displays of orchids, lilies, and special hybrid bulb plantings. Keukenhof Gardens is in its 68th year of operation and is open only 8 weeks a year. Last year, during those 8 weeks, 1.1 million visitors toured the gardens. There are about 30 full-time gardeners working year-round in the gardens, planting 7 million bulbs in preparation for the spring displays. Each autumn, over a period of 3 months, gardeners plant the bulbs by hand in a completely new design. The bulbs are selected to bloom throughout the 8-week period of the garden's opening. Bulbs are supplied for free by 100 bulb growers who use the opportunity to show off some of the latest varieties and hybrids. In the fall, the gardeners dig up the bulbs at the end of each season and destroy them by order of the growers. Most are used as food for livestock. Let's watch some of these slides of the flowers, and we'll continue with the narration in a few minutes. Originally, this land was used for hunting and gathering herbs for the kitchen in the estate of a countess. In fact, Keukenhof means kitchen garden in Dutch. In 1857, an English-style landscape garden was installed here, and the name Keukenhof or kitchen garden stuck. In 1949, 20 Dutch bulb growers came together with a plan to use Keukenhof as a show for spring bulbs. The following year, the park opened to 236,000 visitors. Coming up is a section on orchids, and we'll conclude the narration after that. Despite its long association with Netherlands, the tulip actually originates in the Himalayas. Tulips came to Holland via Turkey in the 16th century during the Dutch Golden Age, and they were traded as a commodity on the Dutch exchanges. The tulip mania bubble reached its peak in Holland around 1637, when one bulb could fetch more than 1,000 guilders, which at that time was more than the cost of a canal house in Amsterdam. The combination of colorful flowers amid picturesque bridges, windmills, streams, and wooded areas provided an idyllic setting. If you're a fan of beautiful gardens, words can barely express all the adjectives to describe the scenery here at Kukenoff. Synonyms for beautiful are elegant, exquisite, fascinating, gorgeous, magnificent, and stunning, and I think they all apply. Visiting Kukenoff Gardens was the most satisfying finish to our last day in the Netherlands. We wanted to see tulips, and did we ever. Our return to the ship and preparations for returning home were starting to occupy our thoughts, but I don't think we'll ever forget the day at Kukenoff Gardens.